We got to start with something. I want to talk about something first before we start. Like this stage, this theater, I mean, everything is freaking amazing. It's crazy. And I mean, the spotlight and everything, but I have a problem with one term that we're using, not at conferences, just in general, is this one. Rockstar developer. So I want to encourage all of you to feel like everyone is the same. You can give a talk. Everyone can apply and give a talk. Like it's nothing spectacular, but we're making it kind of like it is. So I want to encourage you a little bit. This is a rock star. This is an actual rock star. And this is everything but a rock star. and we're developers, all right? So another term that we use is he rocked the stage. And the reality is he read his notes from a made on a plane slides, trembling for 30 minutes, just, you know. So this is the reality. Rolling Stones rocked the stage in front of like 1.5 million people. We don't rock the stage. So I want to encourage you to give a talk at a conference because at the end of the day, we're all code monkeys trying to make weird libraries work together by writing shitty hacks. Thank you. Thanks. All right. So just ignore this. I love Frontend, I love open source, and I love making stuff. So you may know some of my stuff. I made custom React scripts, MobX router, OK Google, CZ, and React Academy. CZ might be interesting for this audience because it's a tool that I made for previewing responsive designs on multiple devices at once. So when you're working on a responsive design, you can just see it, how it works on multiple devices. And lately I've been focusing on teaching, so I have my own thing called React Academy. I'm doing workshops for conferences, companies, and so on. So if you need training in any of these technologies, you can just let me know. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, oh, that's some leaked code from Apple. It's my bad. Yeah, we're going to talk about the exciting future of React. As I say the word, you can see a few Angular developers, they're already out. We're going to talk about React, how it saves us, is the latest and greatest, and blah, blah, blah. Specifically, I'm going to talk about React 16. It's funny to me the version number because we were having fun when Angular went from 1 to 2 to 3 to just Angular or something, and React went from 0.14 to 15. We were like, oh, fine, that makes sense. That makes total sense, right? That's okay. So we're going to talk about what's new in React 16, which is the current version, it's 16.2, and about what's coming in the future. So how I saw the announcement and how people should have seen the announcement of what is React 16 is something like this. React Fiber is the core React algorithm, and it's been completely rewritten. And then we have some smaller stuff like portals, error boundaries, server-side rendering, it's improved, custom DOM attributes, rendering multiple elements without a wrapper, and rendering only a string. So these are the smaller things. How people saw the announcement was something like this. Rendering multiple elements without a wrapper, Fiber, whatever, some other stuff. So Fiber, no one cares about it. So we're going to start with the thing that people like, of course, which is rendering multiple elements without a wrapper. What is that? We need to understand a little bit, if you're not familiar with React, and why we say it's just JavaScript. This is what it does in the background. So when you put these weird divs and tags and so on into your JavaScript, it eventually gets transpiled to react.createElement calls. So at the end of the day, it becomes only JavaScript. That's what we mean. So when I return something from this header, I can return only one thing, right? I cannot return two things at once because that's how JavaScript works. So if I try to do this, if I just try to wrap these two divs into parentheses, it's going to throw an error. It's going to say they must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. But what if I have a scenario where I want to render these two elements but not wrap them into anything else? Like I want this component to return two things. So we cannot do this. We cannot do this in JavaScript, right? We can return only one thing. We can do this, we can wrap them in a div, but what if I don't want this div? I just want this component to render list items, which are two list items. So we can do it right now in React 16. It's kind of ugly the way we can do it. It's because we need to wrap it in an array. So we wrap it in an array, and for every element, we have to put this comma next to it. So it's kind of like not what we wanted. So of course, when they announced this, the community went in and wrote this component called aux, and it's just taking the children and returning the children. So you can use it instead of the array, and somehow, magically, it works. So if I wrap these list elements with aux, it will work, and it will just return those elements without the wrapper, without the array, and so on. And I have some live footage of the React team when they saw this component. They were like, don't worry, guys, we're going to do an official API for this, and it's called fragments. So how you use fragments, you import them from React, and if I wrap these li elements with a fragment, actually the fragment won't render anything, so we're just going to render those three elements. And that's pretty cool. There's also a JSX syntax for it, also why people are moving to Vue and Angular. Like, when you come from another framework and you see this shit and you're like, nope, I'm going back to whatever I was using, jQuery, whatever. So it's like empty tags, empty open tag, empty close tag, and you put stuff in between. When you do that, it's the same as doing fragment, and it's not going to render anything, it's just going to return this few allies. I prefer the more specific fragment syntax. So let's see some simple use cases. We have a pair of pairs, array of arrays of similar things, and we loop over them. And you see that in my UL, I always want to have LIs, right? So I don't want to have a div wrapping these two LIs. So when I wrap these two list elements with a fragment, actually our syntax is going to be fine because I'm going to have an unordered list, and inside of it, I'm going to have LIs. So this is where fragments are really cool. I have another use case. I have a list of celebrities here, and I map over them. And after each celebrity, instead of returning a div or something, I'm just returning a fragment and the name of the celebrity. But for each one of them, except the last one, I want to render a line. But I don't want to put the line in the name in a div because I don't want that syntax. I want right now just to put something without wrapping them. You cannot map over something and return multiple things, so this is where we would put them in a fragment. So yeah, fragments are cool. Another new thing we have is components now they can render strings. So instead of rendering and wrapping the string into a span, into a div, into whatever, we can just return a string and it will work. So previously this wasn't possible, it's pretty cool. And now I have this convert text to emoji component and I'm putting some text in its children. It's just going to render text without wrapping it in a span or a div and so on. Then we have portals. They provide a first-class way to render children into a DOM node that exists outside the DOM hierarchy of the parent component. So if I have a component, I put something in it, but I don't want it to render right there. I want it to render somewhere outside. The use cases is you have a model, you have a pop-up widget, you have a tooltip. You want something that you want to render in another place, and that's where you would use a portal. So when I read about portals, like, who thought of that? I never thought of this scenario. It's pretty amazing what you can do with them. And if I have this ID where I would mount my React app into the root ID, and then I want maybe a model to always render in the div that has an ID of model. So we can use portals for this scenario where I can declare this model component, but instead of returning something like returning a div, I'm telling it to create a portal of all the children and just put them into the element that has an ID of model. So no matter where I render this model component, it's actually going to put everything inside of that div. So here's a use case. If I have an about page and I have a bunch of things in this about page, and at the end I have this model, and it doesn't matter that I'm rendering right now in the about page, it's actually going to put it outside in that div that had an ID of model. So that's what a portal does. But how far is too far? When I say we can render into any element, what do we mean by like any element? Let's do something crazy. It's demo time. Let's pray to the demo gods. I have this amazing app. It has one line of text. Some people call this a startup. They're like, I'm working on my startup. And they have one line of text. So I hope you can see this. This is my startup. So we're going to start here, but just, is this font size large enough? Is it okay? All right, cool. So here we're going to add a counter. It's a pretty stupid counter. It doesn't do anything for now. And in my component, I'm just going to add display counter into the state, and I'm going to say false. And here I'm going to hide the counter for a second. This will come from the state. And it's gone. If I set this to true, we're going to display the counter. All right, this is pretty basic stuff in React, right? So on component did mount, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set an interval of 1 second. And I'm going to grab the current state. I'm going to return a new state. We're going to put the counter actually here first. So we're going to say that counter is 0. Let's ignore this for a while. We're going to put a counter of 0. OK, so this is in our state now. And what I'm going to do when the component mounts, I'm going to set an interval of 1 second, grab the current state, and return counter is going to be state.counter plus 1. Sorry, what? Oh, yeah. So here I have to grab my counter. And I can zoom in a little bit. We can see it start ticking. Okay, this is nothing impressive. What if I create a component here and we just call it counter? It's just going to be a function component, and it's going to return a div. And inside of this div, we're just going to render the children. So whatever I put into this children, it's going to work. So if I put the counter component here like this, no matter what I put inside, it's going to work because I'm just rendering the children. All right, it's not going to work because I forgot something here. Yep, children. We take them from the props. And now when I put this counter into here, like whatever I put, it's going to go there. But this is nothing impressive. It's just a React component, right? So what do we want to do is we move this counter into another div by using a portal. So if I go to my index.html, I have this ID with counter. And if we see it right now, it's in root, we have the app, and we have the counter right here. So I'm just going to make it simpler and just add a class here. Class name equals counter, just so we see, and class name equals app. All right, that should be enough. And we see that the counter goes inside of here. So let's not do that. And actually, instead of returning a div here, what we can do is we can say react.create portal, and we're going to put the children into document.getElementById, and we're going to put the counter there. Let's make this a bit prettier by using prettier. Create portal is not a function. Jesus. That early into the demo? Or React DOM, sorry, yeah. I have a few demos in mind, so bear with me here. So we're going to grab React DOM, and we're going to create a portal. The first property is what we want to put in that portal, and the second property is the element. So cool, now our counter is not in the app anymore, although right here in the code it is, but actually it renders outside. It can still use all the lifecycle methods, it can use everything from the parent component, but we render it in another div, so this is pretty powerful. Let's make something crazier. Let's call this a window portal. So instead of counter here, I'm going to say class window portal extends component. I'm going to return null for now. And what we want here is whenever we render this window portal component, like window portal right here, and I'm going to grab this, just put it outside. So we're going to either display the window portal or not. But what I want is actually to create another window. And whenever I toggle that state, I want the window to open and close. So portals can kind of do that. What I need is first I need an element, right? So I need to say container element equals document.create element, and we're going to create a div. But I'm putting this on the class. I'm still not rendering it anywhere. So here I'm going to return react DOM.create portal. And inside of it, I'm going to put the children, which I'm going to grab from the props. And I'm going to put them into this.container element. Nothing works, right? Because I don't put that div. So the portal works, it's going to put it in a div, but that div is not appended anywhere. So let's just, what we can do on component did mount, what we can do is we can say window.document.body.append child, and we can put this.container element, and eventually it should go somewhere. Yep, it's here. Because we tell it to append this div to the body. But what we can do is we can create a window, so we can say external window, and we can say, sorry, this is null here, because it's not open yet. And here in component did mount, we can say this.external window equals windows.open. Okay. I need to do something else. Oh, easy boy. Okay, we set it to false because now it opens it by default. And yeah, instead of rendering this to the container element, we can just append it to the window. So what we can do is we can say external window.document. Yep. And now we need a button to actually trigger this component because now it's invisible, right? So I'm going to add a button here. I'm going to say onClick equals this.toggle window. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this.setState, and I'm just going to use display window here. Just change it for a second. Display window, display window. We're going to grab the current state, return some new state, and we're going to say this is the opposite of the current state, like this. And toggle the window. Let's see. So you see when I toggle something in my component, what it can do, it creates a portal to another window, but the counter, if you can see it there, it still continues to work there because it's the same state of the parent component. So yeah, this is what you can do with portals. There are a few other scenarios with Windows, but this is the one I found. I read it online, I didn't think of this scenario, but it's pretty powerful. And when you think of all the other things that you can do with portals, it's amazing. Okay. Next, we have error boundaries. How do we handle JavaScript errors in components? Until now, we didn't have any official API of doing this. Now we have something. So I have one method, just don't have errors. That's one way to handle errors, just don't have errors. Second one would be if you don't want to see the errors, just don't open the console at all, and you're not going to see the errors. But the third way, the official React way right now of handling errors is by using component did catch. So component did catch, what it does is, explain in the next slide. If a class component defines this method, it becomes an error boundary, so it will catch all the errors of the children. Not of the component itself, but all the children that it has. If they throw an error, this error boundary component is going to grab the error, and it can render a different UI or do something else. So let's see an example. We define a component called error boundary, and inside of it we have component did catch, which will receive the error and set a state of has error. In this scenario, we're going to return an H1 saying something went wrong. Like, this is better than just showing a blank screen to users and they don't have an idea what's going on. This way, we can catch all the errors. If we have something, we can return something else for that particular state. And how do we use it? If I have a gallery widget, and I'm pretty sure that my colleague wrote it and he's terrible and it's going to have a bug, I'm going to do him a favor and I'm going to wrap it in an error boundary. So if that component, whatever it does inside, fetches data and so on, if it throws an error, the error boundary is going to catch it. Instead of rendering the gallery widget, the whole page is going to work, but there we're going to say something went wrong. And of course, right now you're getting the idea. I can just wrap the entire app in error boundary. I'm going to catch all the errors, right? And it totally works. Like, I've tried it, I admit it, I tried it on an app, but it's going to replace your app from a white screen to a white screen with a text, something went wrong. I mean, it's still better than a white screen, but I would advise you to wrap multiple components with error boundaries. If something throws, everything's going to work except that one small thing. Then we have, oh, it was supposed to be React Fiber, but okay. If I was Link Clark or something smarter that can explain you with graphics and pretty things what React Fiber is, how it works under the hood with milliseconds, I'm not. So I'm going to give you the short version. When it wasn't Fiber, it was slow. Now it's Fiber, it's fast. So to be serious, thanks. So it's responsible for all of these new fancy features that we're hearing, but it doesn't get like the applause because it's just, we don't know. So because of Fiber, we have error boundaries, fragments, and so on, and it enables something really powerful, async rendering, and apps will be more responsive because they're not blocking the main thread anymore, and React knows better when to render and when to pause. But the title of the talk was like the future of React, not the present, so maybe you may be thinking I'm fake news, I'm talking about what's already in there, so we should switch it a little bit and talk about what's coming next to React, specifically React 16.3. That's the version that's supposed to be released soon. So we have a new way of declaring refs. We have this new method called createRef, and it's not meant to replace callback refs, but it's just a new way of using references. So now that I want this.divRef to point to this input, when the component mounts, I can just say this.divRef.value.focus. So I have a reference to that particular element. Finally, we have a new context API. That's amazing. Like, I'm so happy about it. Like, for years, if you go to the context API, like you have a new developer, he gets into React and he's like, how do I share state between components? And people say, yeah, I can try using context. And when you go to the context document, to the docs, it say, don't use it, it's not stable. So libraries like Redux, MobX, GraphQL, Apollo, and so on are using it under the hood, but not a lot of people are actually using it in like, as it is. It's a funny GIF. So 2018 is going to be remembered for two things. The kids are eating Tide Pods and context. I think so many people have problems with sharing state in React that context, like finally when it's properly fixed, it's going to be a big thing this year. Second demo time. Context, cool. It's my new startup. I'm going to go with context. So I have this stupid app. It does nothing for now. It just says context demo, and I want to have a header component. Eventually, I want to theme my app. So how do we make the simplest theming component possible? So I'm gonna say theme context equals react.create context. This is how do we create context with the new API. Now, inside of here, I can put a string, I can put an array, I can put an object, I can put whatever I want. This will be the initial value of this theme context. We want to create something for theming. So I'm going to say the background color is red and color is yellow or something. And now other components can just grab this theme context and consume it and actually grab these values. No matter where they are in the component tree, they can just grab values from the context. So let's just create a header component here, and I'm gonna do this actually, and I'm gonna say header for now, nothing fancy. Let's add some ugly styles, like height 30. That should be enough. It doesn't have any colors for now, so it just sits there. We can move it above because it's our header. How do we consume this context? Just imagine this in a separate file. I don't have access to this. What we can do is we can just put theme context.consumer here. And now I need to make this a child function, and the first argument of that function will be my context. In this case, it will be this. I just decided I'm going to call it a theme. I can call it a whatever. This works. And right here, let's see if this didn't break. Cool. I can say that background color is theme.background color, and I can say that color is theme.color. Cool. So it's beautiful material design, and you can see now every component can actually grab something from the theme. Sorry for these colors, they're terrible. So let's actually make this useful. How does this value exist? Because it's by default here, but what if you want to override it? So inside of my app component, I can wrap everything into theme context.provider, and I can set value. So I can set some new values here. I can say the background color is black and the color is white. So even though I have default values, this is going to override them eventually. And even if I don't put something in here, it's going to work, because now I have a theme provider. I have a theme context.provider. So basically, when you create a context, it gives you two extra components, consumer and provider, and you can use them in combination. I have no battery. That's amazing. If someone can bring in a MacBook Pro charger, because I still have 10%, but it's risky. Anyway, so this is not useful for now. We made a consumer, we made a provider. Let's make a theme manager. So I'm going to call it theme manager. It's a React component. For now, it's just going to return a div with the children inside. I'm going to grab the children from the props. And here we're going to say that theme name equals dark. And here we're going to put two themes. We're going to put a dark one that has a black background color and a light one that has, I don't know, something like this. And I'm gonna move the theme provider from our app, and I'm gonna replace it with our theme manager component. Okay, and we're gonna put this as children. And in my theme manager component, if I go up, I'm gonna wrap this div with the theme provider. This should work, right? Yeah. Now what I can say is I want the light theme to be default. And here, instead of providing values, I can say this.themes and just this.state.theme name. And it should provide the pink one. And if I change it to dark, it will provide the black one. And let's add a toggle. So here I can add a button. And I can say toggle theme. And on click, toggle theme. We're going to grab the current state, return some new state, and we're going to say the theme name equals if state theme name equals dark, then return light, otherwise return dark. Question mark. This is amazing. All right, so our theme provider works. So this is a way where we have one component, we call it theme manager. It has some state inside, but it also provides a way for other components to get that state. Whenever we wrap these components with theme manager, it's actually going to provide those values to Thank you very much. Nope. Regular one. Right. I think we're going to make it. It's going to be risky, but let's try. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Just look at this name. It's terrible. What happened? It's OK. So this is a new lifecycle method. It's a pretty long, terrible name to remember. When I wrote it into Keynote, my Mac crashed. It told me we were out of battery. When I tried to tweet about this new lifecycle method, Twitter told me not enough characters left. Sorry. It's like and in one GitHub issue, one of the maintainers of React is saying like, we don't want people to use it anyway, so that's why we added get in front of it. So it's long and hard to type. Then why didn't you name it something like get props and updates, like something weird, right? So people won't use it. They won't bother to type that. So what this method does is it's a static method. It exists on the class, and it doesn't exist on an instance. So it's not component specific, it's class specific. That's why it's static. And what it does, it updates the state based on the change of props. So let's show this method. It's a static method, just imagine it's on a class, and we get the next props in the previous state. We can combine them, we can compare them, and so on. At the end, we return null if we don't want the state to update, or we return an object if we want the state to update to something else. So it's a pretty nice method to have, I think. There wasn't any way of doing this before. It was pretty complicated. This way, we can update the state based on the next props. What will be deprecated in React 16.4 is the following methods: component will mount, component will update, and component will receive props. They will be deprecated. They're not going to be completely removed, so don't worry. Your React doesn't introduce any breaking changes until React 17. So at React 17, eventually these won't exist. And when you use them now in React 16.4, it's going to say that you shouldn't use these methods. Please make sure you migrate before we remove them. There is a rumor, take it with a grain of salt. It's not a rumor, it was in a GitHub comment that there's a new component API coming that's not going to include classes. Maybe they're going to call it like create component or something, I don't know. And the last thing, and the last demo that I want to talk to you about is React call return. So this is a published package inside of the React repo. It's not in the official API yet. Maybe it's not going to be ever, but it's pretty cool. And it says, like in 17 lines here, it says, it's experimental, use at own risk, not as stable. No, really, it's unstable. It's an experiment. It will break. It has 10 things why you shouldn't use it. But how I read it is, nope, it's stable enough for production, just show it to an audience and show a demo of it. So when you import it, you literally import unstable underscore create call and unstable underscore create return. But I would hate to use the API as this, so I have a clever idea of making it more stable. You rename the imports to create call and create return, then it works. Thank you. Last demo. This is the hardest one. Like I use this API only for a day, so bear with me here. New startup coming up. There it is. It's amazing. Our designers work hard for this. We have few tabs. And when we click them, they change colors. But what API do we want for this? Like, this is already written. I'm just showing it to you how it should work. We want the API to be, we have a tabs component with a default value, and then we have multiple tab components inside. But the way that the tabs component and the tab component communicate shouldn't be seen here. We don't want to pass any values from it. So we want the tabs component to take care of the state, which one is selected and so on. And we want a way for it to pass that state to the tabs, but we don't want to do it here. So whenever we give this to another person to use it, they shouldn't care about it. They can just add more tabs here. It's going to work. So this is what we're aiming for. I'm going to delete the components. And now we have undefined, because we need to define everything. So first thing I'm going to do is create a tabs component. And what it's going to do is going to render some tabs. Let's just add style. And flex direction, one of them will work. We're just going to put the children here for now. Nothing else. And we're going to create a tab component, which will be dumb. In this case, it won't have any state because it receives the props from outside. So this one is a tab. It's just going to show the children. And the children are going to come from this component right here. Let's see if this works. Amazing. What do I want to do now is just maybe add here like border or solid red. And let's add padding. All right, we have some tabs. Now they're not doing anything. So if I do the cursor pointer thingy here, when I click on them, nothing happens. So what we want in this tabs component is we want to keep a track of a value. So we're going to say we have default value is home and about and so on. So here we're going to say that the value is this.props.default value at first. So at first the value for this tabs component will be home. And what we want to do is for this home component, we wanted to tell it that it's selected. So right here, when I'm going to say background color, if it's selected, we're going to make it pink. Otherwise, we're going to make it white. And just for the sake of it, here I'm going to say is selected true. So our gallery should be selected right now. But I don't want to do this here, right? I don't want to mess with this. So how can this tabs component communicate to the tab component when it's just rendering it as children here? So React has a method. Is react children.map, and we're going to put the children here, and then for every child, what we're going to do is just clone element, clone the child, and just add some extra props to it. So if I do it like this, it's just going to clone the elements. It's just going to do the thing that we had until now. But I want to add an extra prop called isSelected, and what I want to do is say compare it to this.state.value and compare it to child.props.value. Child.props in this case would be this one, all right? So now we're cloning all of our elements, we're providing some state to it, is selected, it's gonna grab is selected, and home will be selected. If I say gallery here, and I go back, the gallery will be selected. But I still can't click, I need a method to click these things. So this is not a good API because when I say is selected, I expect it to come as a prop, but I don't provide the prop here. So developers might be confused. Where is this coming from? When I see is selected, like it's magic happening in the background. So let's add the method for selecting a tab. So I'm going to say select tab equals, and I'm going to put a value here. I'm going to say set state value equals value. And to this component, I'm going to provide select tab is this dot select tab child.props.value. And it's going to be a function. So now this will also receive select tab, and when I click it, oops, not this. Okay, it works. But this is, I have a similar queue or something, yeah. All right. So this works, and this is how people did it, like, before this package is not published yet, so this is the only way for you to do it right now if you don't want to pass the props manually here. So cloning children and so on, it's going to break because if I want to grab these tabs and call them magic tabs, and these two tabs I want to put them like here, magic tabs equals a component, and it's going to return, let's say, an array of two things, and this is going to break. See, these two are working, these two are not working. Why? Because here we're literally cloning the direct children, not every children that's nested inside. So the direct children are this, this, and this. So magic tabs is actually receiving select tab and value, but what we need is we need tab to receive those two values. So this is why it breaks. So let's revert it, and let's show the solution before we end. Remove this here, make sure everything works. So let's show it with React call return. You think I was kidding? No, I cannot look at that unstable. Okay, so now I have this method, create return, and now my tab component, what is it going to do? Instead of returning a div right away, it's going to create a return that's going to be executed later by the parent component. So it's going to create a return, and right here, it's going to add an object, and inside of this object, we're going to have render tab, which is going to be a function, and we're going to put isSelected and select tab in there. And it's going to return this div. The second thing that I'm going to put in this object is the value. So we grab the value from the props, which is going to be home, about, gallery, or contact, and so on, and we're going to put it here. So right now this will break because create return must be intercepted somewhere by a create call. So in our tabs component, instead of cloning children, we need to create a call, and they're going to communicate, and actually the tabs component is going to call render tab for us. So instead of doing all of this cloning of children, it's probably illegal. So we should just create a call, and this call receives 3 parameters. The first one is children. The second one is a function, and the third one is this.props. We only care about this function right now. It receives props, and it receives, it's going to receive the tabs. So in this case, we're going to call them tabs. We can call them whatever we want. It's just a function parameter. And right here, what we can do is for each one of the tabs, so I'm going to map over the tabs, I'm going to say tab.render tab. And I'm going to provide it with an object. Is selected, select tab, like the same object that we have in cloning, but now it's a better API of doing it. So instead of doing child.props.value, I can just do tab.value, because tab is actually this whole object, and tab.value is this one. Tab.render tab is this one. So now inside of this tabs component, I create the call, and I'm mapping all over the tabs. I still have this for the value, and I have this for the select tab. This works from the first try. I don't think, oh, it works. Cool. So this is a much better way of these components communicating with each other, because, let's try and break it once again, when I have magic tabs, just imagine this will be like routes, and this is...
We have just 1 more minute.
Yeah. This is protected routes or something, and you want to keep your protected routes in a component. In this case, I have tabs, and I have magic tabs, and I'm going to grab these magic tabs, put them here in an array. They still work because we're using call return. We're not using any cloning, so it works. It's a pretty cool API. So sorry if I took way more time. I'm going to finish right now. Thank you for listening. You can find more about me at kitze.io or Kitze on GitHub or Kitze on Medium or whoever stole Kitze on Twitter. Like, screw you because you tweeted once, and it's the Kitze on Twitter. Ask me anything except what font is that, what font size is that, what editor is that, what theme do you use. We should skip these questions forever. Thank you very much for listening. Bedankt en tot ziens. Thanks.